shopping with her mistress, or for her mistress. And we decided that the mistress was the female owner, right? Okay. They walked and talked and agreed to meet again. Henry felt like singing, but slaves didn't dare sing in the streets. Instead, months later, Henry asked Nancy to be his wife. When both their masters agreed, Henry and Nancy were married. Soon there was a little baby, then another, and another. Henry knew that they were very lucky. They lived together even though they had different masters. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. "I'm afraid he will sell our children," she said. Henry sat very still. So what did we learn from this page? Yeah.
He got married and had some kids.
Okay, got married, had children, so he was allowed to do that. Slaves were allowed to marry if what? Was unusual because they had different masters and they were allowed to marry. So whose children? What slave owner owned the children?
Well, both of them?
That's a good question.
Or whoever they get sold to.
If they get sold, okay, who would be the one to sell them? Would it be her master or his? Well, here's the line. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. "I'm afraid he will sell our children." Okay, so the children must have followed the mother. Henry worked hard all morning. He tried to forget what Nancy had said. His friend James came into the factory. He whispered to Henry, "Your wife and children were just sold at the slave market." "No," cried Henry. Henry couldn't move. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. "Twist that tobacco," the boss poked Henry. Henry twisted tobacco leaves. His heart twisted in his chest. Do you think that's how things happen? All of a sudden, his family was gone again. And I like the connection that the author chose, how the word choice that the author used, how he twisted tobacco leaves, but his heart was twisted in his chest. Kind of paints a picture. At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town. A large group of slaves was tied together. The owners shouted at them. Henry looked for his family. "Father, father!" Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her at the same moment she saw him. But he wiped away his tears, and Nancy too was gone. Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work, and at night he ate supper and went to bed. Henry tried to think of happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away everyone he had loved. He knew that he would never see his family again. Many weeks passed. One morning Henry heard singing. A little bird flew out of the tree into the open sky, and Henry thought about being free. But how? He lifted a crate, and he knew the answer. He asked James and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day at an empty warehouse. Henry arrived with a box. "I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves," he said. James stared at the box and then at Henry. "What if you cough and someone hears you?" "I will cover my mouth and hope," Henry said. Now, do you think this really happened?
Oh, yeah. I heard something about
We know this really happened.
Yes, I heard of something like this. Like, a guy mailed, like, someone, a slave mailed himself.
Yeah, he's trying to mail himself to freedom. Okay? Why do you think he's doing this?
Get free.
To get free? And what what is making him think he'll never see his family again?
That he's gonna get free and they're at a different plantation. And if you're free and like normally you'd go to the north and your family's in the south, well, you're probably a lot of states in between them.
Okay, so there's a lot of states in between them. Is he going to see his family if he goes to the north? Probably not. Does he think he's going to see his family now? No, he's kind of given up hope on that right now, hasn't he? Okay. Dr. Smith wrote on the box, to William H. Johnson, Arch Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Henry would be delivered to friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, this side up with care. Why did he do that? Yeah.
Because otherwise he'd fall over and get stuck on his head and they didn't take care of it.
Exactly. So hopefully they'll take care of him a little bit. Okay. What does this tell us about Henry? What else is this telling us about him? Yeah.
He hates slavery and he wants to be free.
Okay. He wants to be free. What else does this tell us?
He's brave.
He's quite brave, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a character trait I'd assign to him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not too many people put themselves into this position because what would happen if he gets caught?
Probably be dead.
He could be killed, right? Slaves were killed when they tried to escape. The other thing is, what might happen to those people that helped him? Dr. Smith
They could be killed.
and William Johnson.
Killed also.
They're putting themselves at risk too, aren't they? So what does that tell us about people in that time period? What do we know now about some people in the South? Yeah.
They were willing to get all the slaves free, even if it cost them their lives.
Okay, so there were people that felt strongly enough that slavery was wrong, that they risked their own lives to help the slaves get free, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be something we should really write down in our organizer. Because too oftentimes people think of things in absolutes.
I don't really have much.
People in the South, that's okay, find some room elsewhere. Right across the bottom. The people in the South weren't all in favor of slavery. Okay. There were good people down there that wanted to help, and that did help. Henry needed an excuse to stay home, or the work boss would think that he had run off. James pointed to Henry's sore finger, but Henry knew that it wasn't bad enough. He opened a bottle of oil of vitriol. "No," cried James. Henry poured it on his hand, and it burned his skin to the bone. Now the boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hand. They arranged to meet the next morning at 4 o'clock. So what did he have to do? What did he have to do here, Kaya?
He had to hurt himself. Like he had to
Yes.
put that oil on his hand.
Okay. So that why?
So he could go.
So he could get out of work
Yeah.
and not be seen as running away, right? To buy himself some time. So what does that say about Henry, that he was willing to pour acid, oil of vitriol is like an acid, on his hand?
That he really, really wants to be free.
Okay. That tells you his determination, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It really does. That speaks to his character quite a bit. The sun was not yet up when Henry climbed into the box. "Ready," he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove it to the station. The railway clerk tipped the box over and nailed a paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks to be careful, but they didn't listen. They just threw the box into the baggage car. So what are we learning about, again, this time period from the picture? Any clues about this time in history? Yep.
They did mail by a horse and wagon and stuff like airplanes and
Okay, because they didn't have those. And where was the crate going next?
Philadelphia.
In a baggage car, which is... Where's the baggage car?
I think it's like a mail cart.
A mail cart? A baggage car is going to be on a train.
Oh.
Okay. Hours passed. Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed for Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot, his eyes ached. He thought his head would burst. He was afraid to move. Someone might hear him. So now where is he?
On a steamship heading to Philadelphia.
Okay, so if you're mailing crates,
To Washington, D.C.
he's heading to Washington, D.C., and now he's on another mode of transportation, right? What is that mode?
Steamboat.
Steamboat. Okay, so very good example of the time frame, right? I'm tired of standing, someone said. Why don't we move around that box and sit on it, said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. He was now on his right. Okay. All right. So, with Rose Blanche,
Yes.
right? We're going to use the same graphic organizer today. As I read the next book, we're going to be trying to really focus in and identify on the historically accurate elements of this book and learn as much about this period of history as we can through the story. Okay? So as we're reading, I might stop you here and there and ask you what kinds of things you're jotting down. We'll share our resources here. We'll share our brains on this topic. And we're also going to probably be stopping and starting and doing some of our key questions along the way as well. Okay? All right, the rest of the group, I need you to turn your voices down, please, because we're taping up here. Okay, so here we have Henry's Freedom Box. First question out of the box, no pun intended. What are you noticing about the cover? What can we learn about the story and about the historical elements from the cover?
He looks like a slave, maybe.
Okay, and the fact that we're talking about a freedom box, freedom, okay, that could clue us into that time period, right?
There's a boy on
Okay,
there.
nice. It's a little boy, young boy, right?
He's, it's a large yard he's in.
Okay,
It's
a large yard, or maybe even
He's
what?
outside.
Maybe even a field. Could be a plantation. Good, Jack. What else?
It won an award.
And it won an award, which tells us what?
It's a good book.
It's gonna be a good book. This is a Caldecott Award. What are Caldecott's given for? Who remembers?
Picture book.
Picture book, exactly. So it's the illustrations in here that won the award, and you're going to probably understand why as we start going through it, okay? Okay, here we go. Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. Henry was a slave, and slaves weren't allowed to know their birthdays. Do you think that's historically true?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
an accurate statement, do you think?
Yeah.
So where on your sheets are you going to jot that little fact down? Yeah.
Probably the plot. Historical accurate
Characters.
plot.
Historically accurate column, yep. Under the characters. Okay. Or it could be under the plot too, because that's a factual thing about that time period that probably will play into the story. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where their master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family, but Henry's mother knew things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing in the wind? They're torn from the trees, like slave children are torn from their families. What does she mean by that? She's comparing the leaves falling off the trees to slaves being torn from their families. What do you think that means, Jack?
They either could be moving from plantation to plantation, or they could be moving from working in the house to working in the field.
Okay. So they could change their location, but they're referring to children torn from their families.
Or they could be like if they're in a family, they could be taken away and put in a plantation.
Yeah, like how leaves get taken away from the trees.
Okay. So the wind takes the leaves
Yeah.
away from the trees. Who could take children away from their families in that world, in that time in our history?
The white people.
Okay, the slave owners could separate the families, couldn't they? Because they, quote unquote, owned them at the time, right? Okay. Do you think that really happened?
Mm-hmm.
It happened, unfortunately, a lot. Okay, so that would be something historically accurate. And what category do you think that information might fall under?
Plot or characters.
Under the plot, probably.
Plot.
One morning, the master called for Henry and his mother. They climbed the wide staircase. The master lay in bed with only a head above the quilt. He was very ill. He beckoned them to come closer. Some slaves were freed by their owners. Henry's heart beat fast. Maybe the master would set them free. But the master said, "You are a good worker, Henry. I'm giving you to my son. You must obey him and never tell a lie." Henry nodded, but he didn't say thank you, because that would have been a lie. Okay. Anything here that we've learned about this time period? Yeah.
It was when they still had slaves,
Yeah. Our characters here were slaves, and this is the slave owner, right?
and it was a long time ago.
What was happening on this page, though? What was the event that took place here?
Their master was getting sick, so they have to go to his brother's house.
Okay. And are they just going to visit?
It said his son.
Are they both going? Anna, are they both going?
Yes.
Yeah,
No, just Henry.
Just Henry's going.
it said his son.
Okay. Henry is going to live with his son. His son will be his new master,
Yeah.
right? So now Henry's being taken away, like the leaves being taken from the trees. Henry's being taken from his family and given to another slave owner. Okay? Do you think that really happened?
Yeah.
Okay. It happened in history. That's a factual event that took place. So that's something you're going to add to your plot list. Okay? And I don't know if you noticed on the front cover, this actually is a true story from the Underground Railroad. So this is a historically, accurate book. This is a real person.
So do you think we'll have anything for the fictionalized info?
That's a really good question. Do you think there might be anything fictionalized in the story?
The guy being sick. Or maybe the guy.
Well, these probably these people aren't like the same exact people. Like they're probably fictionalized people.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, he had an owner, right?
Oh yeah, but
that's
it
right.
might not be
maybe
that
he
exact.
didn't look like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's hard to know, right? Okay, because that was a very long time ago. All right, here we go. Later that day, Henry watched a bird soar high above the trees. Free bird, happy bird, Henry thought. Henry said goodbye to his family. He looked across the field, and the leaves swirled in the wind. So again, they're referencing the leaves falling from the trees, right? Just as Henry is being taken from his family. Do you see the connection there?
Yeah.
Okay. What else do you notice on here that would be historically important for us to understand about that time period? Pictures teach us a lot. What do you think?
Maybe the horse and wagon.
Yep, horse and wagon. Didn't they have cars back then?
No.
No, they didn't. That's how they traveled. Who is in the wagon? What do you notice? Who else is in the wagon?